Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. Welcome to TechStrong TV for today, Monday, April 20th. That's 420 if you're counting. It's a good number. We're happy to have you here today. We've been having a blast. This is our fourth week of TechStrong TV. We hope you're enjoying it, whether you're watching it on TV, your computer, your tablet, your laptop, whether you're just using the work from home fitness videos from Jeremy Jones or watching maybe just segments of some of the great interviews we've been having or some of our old vintage from the archives videos. It's just a lot of great stuff there. Mitchell Ashley, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, Jing Grohl, CEO of DevOps Institute, Mike Vizard on channel. We're developing quite a roster of talent and segments to try to keep you informed as we go through these sort of uncharted waters. Today's show, much like our earlier shows, features a lot of new, a little bit of old. We're going to pull one good one from our archives for you as well. And I think you're going to enjoy it. Our show today features an interview with Kamesh Pemaraju from Platform 9. Platform 9 recently released a free managed Kubernetes offering. It's really just push a button and boom, it stands up a kube for you, whether it's on your private cloud or what have you. Also going to talk a little bit about edge computing there. From that, we are then going to head over to meet with a good guy to talk to, Guy Podjarny, who is the co-founder president of SNCC. And SNCC's come up with 10 tips for secure coding from home, and Guy's going to share that with us. Then we're going to, as I said, go to the archives, and we're going to go all the way back to 2018 at KubeCon in Seattle, and we're going to feature John Willis interviewing the one and only Kelsey Hightower, talk a little bit about what the state of DevOps and Kubernetes and cloud native was at that point. And I like watching these older ones from early 2019, 2018, because it gives you, with the advantage of hindsight, it gives you a chance to really look into it. Anyway, we'll show you that interview, and then I'll be back here with the news. We'll have Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor, Mitchell Ashley, as I mentioned, and we'll close things up. So it should be about 2 hours, a little over, as usual, for our show today. And we're going to get started right after this commercial.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, TechStrong, featuring John Bacha-Galupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
All right, back here in studio. As I mentioned, our first guest today is Kamesh Pemaraju from Platform 9. Platform 9's an interesting company. They really, have been very involved in Kubernetes platforms, just a managed Kubernetes platform, managed cloud. They're also now starting to see edge computing come into this. Anyway, it's part of the it wasn't actually part of COVID. They were going to release this anyway. COVID just happened. Platform 9's released a free managed Kubernetes platform that anyone can use. And Kamesh is going to tell us more about that and more. So let's head over to that interview now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Okay. Our next guest here on TechStrong TV is Kamesh Pemaraju of Platform 9. Kamesh, did I mess it up too much?
No, it was perfect.
Oh, okay. All right, good. All right, Kamesh, we've had you on, I think, as we were talking off camera. The last time we spoke was in KubeCon in San Diego. That was probably like last November, October, something like that, right?
That's right.
And today it seems like a lifetime ago with everything going on. It's funny, the next KubeCon is scheduled for August in Amsterdam. I don't know if I'll be there. if they'll even have it after it was already, of course, put off from last month. But anyway, for those who may not be familiar with Platform 9 in our audience, Kamesh, why don't you give us I think most people are, but just in case, a quick level set on what Platform 9 does.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. Again, my pleasure to be here. As always, it's great to talk with you. For the benefit of the audience, very high level, Platform 9 is a startup based in Silicon Valley. We have been in business for about 6 years. Our founders all came from VMware. They're all engineers. They were working on the cloud initiatives at VMware. And when they realized that what's needed in order to make cloud successful for enterprises within their private environments or their edge environments was really this idea of a management plane, right? So the idea of a SaaS delivered management plane. That was sort of their breakthrough idea, because they looked at how public clouds ran their infrastructure, and it was done through a lot of IP development around automation, troubleshooting, delivering of services in a highly automated way through a lot of IP development, a lot of engineers, a lot of software, a lot of automation. And that was kind of their breakthrough idea, their insight into how Platform 9 got started. So we started off with the OpenStack technology, and that was delivered as a SaaS service, and which we still do today. It's VM management, for those of you who may not be familiar with OpenStack. And we've also rolled out Kubernetes about 3 years ago. Again, the same idea. You take an open source technology like Kubernetes, like OpenStack, these frameworks and all of the associated ecosystem parts, and you take this management plane idea and deliver it as a SaaS service to companies that want those kinds of cloud-like consumption model. The big difference between a private cloud and what we do, Alan, is we allow customers to choose the freedom for them to pick their own infrastructure. So if they want to run it in the edge, they want to do it in their own data center, they want to run in a colo location. Basically, we take those locations, that infrastructure, and turn that into a cloud instantly. So that in a nutshell is what we do. We've been doing a lot of work with Kubernetes, obviously, in the past 3 years. But the idea is exactly the same. How do you make that enterprise container as a service experience that one gets from a public cloud, but now you can get it on your own bare metal in your own environment?
Thank you. Thank you for the great description, Kamesh. And you know what? I apologize. I should have also asked you if you can share with our audience what your role with Platform 9 is.
Sure. I run product marketing here at Platform 9. Everything from content development to it's a product-focused marketing role. So I work very closely with our engineering folks and our product management people to try to get the best features and the capabilities of the product easily consumable by our customers and our prospects.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Let's move on then. So, Kamesh, Platform 9 released a Kubernetes tool, I guess just a couple of weeks before all of this COVID stuff hit, correct? Why don't you share with our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, what we released was a free version of our enterprise product. So we've had our enterprise Kubernetes managed service for over 3 years. And that was meant mainly for large-scale enterprise deployments. So companies like Juniper, Aruba Networks, S&P Global, and others have deployed that at scale, hundreds of nodes across multiple data centers. But what we found out was there are a lot of people like DevOps engineers and developers that want an easy access and an easy way of getting their hands on Kubernetes, but do so in an environment of their choice. So to that end, and also to kind of broaden our access to our technology to more companies, whether they are startups or small companies, we launched a free version. It's a completely SaaS-based self-service Kubernetes offering. You can basically go to our website, platform9.com, and there is a button there that says deploy a free cluster. And you click on that and give your email address, and within a few minutes, you can basically choose a target platform for you to deploy Kubernetes onto, and within a few minutes, you've got Kubernetes up and running. So that's the offering, right? And it's a unique offering, in my opinion. I mean, other than the public clouds where you can go to EKS or Amazon or what have you. But if you really want to run in your own environment on bare metal or at the edge, I think this is a great offering. And it's pretty unique in that it's just like a public cloud experience. It's a SaaS offering. So you log in, basically you deploy the Kubernetes cluster in wherever you want, and then consume it like a public cloud. And it's entirely free forever. It's not it's not a free trial or anything like that. And we have very generous capacity options, and obviously there's community Slack support and so on.
Excellent. The idea of just pushing a button and deploying Kubernetes, not in a public, but in a private cloud or bare metal or whatever you want, is pretty amazing. Now, of course, when you guys were developing this and you deployed it, you weren't thinking that the whole world was going to start moving to work from home in the next couple of weeks. How's that affected? What effect has that had on the rollout of this?
Well, luckily for us, Alan, we rolled it out just before the COVID crisis hit, and we were kind of forced to be, to shelter in place, and all that just came after we launched it. We launched it on March 18th, if I recall correctly.
Sure.
And within a day or two, we had the shelter in place here in California, and that shut everything down. And all of us, of course, are now working from home. In a way, this is good because now, there's not a whole lot of hand-holding or going to a data center to do this stuff. You can basically get started on your laptop, right? At your home, bring another spare laptop, spin up a single node, Kubernetes, version up and running in 5 minutes, and you can play with it. You can, learn a lot. We have rolled out a bunch of tutorials, and we have a lot of good documentation that goes with it. So in a way, it worked in our favor because now people can actually try this out on their own and in their own systems. All you need is a laptop to get started.
That's fantastic. Kamesh, and I'll tell you something else. I've heard this, and we're talking to a lot of people here on TechStrong TV, right? This is a great time for many developers, DevOps folks, even security people. They're working from home. They have a little bit of time on their hands, whether it be in evening hours or, what have you. It's a good time to experiment. It's a good time to try offerings. A free offering like this to spin up a free Kubernetes thing, man, if I was in that space, I would jump on it just to see. I mean, just so I can learn. Yeah. Right? What a great thing. I wonder, and I don't expect you to share with us, but I wonder how many people who are signing up and using this are doing it, saying, "Hey, this is on their dime." Right? I can spin up a Kubernetes, almost enterprise class Kubernetes kind of cluster, and really put it through its paces and get my chops up. And if it's really good, this is something I want to bring to the company, right? When things maybe get back to normal and we can start doing, or look, we have a certain issue with everything going on, and this is exactly the kind of solution that'll help with that.
That's a great point, Alan. I think you exactly hit it right, because people now can do things in their spare time. The other thing also with the offering, Alan, is it's deploying Kubernetes itself has gotten quite easier, I would say, over the last couple of years. There are lots of open source tools out there. But what our offering really brings to the table is this ongoing, what we call day two operations. Now think about everything you need to do to keep this cluster up and running, whether that is monitoring or it's upgrades or security patching and backups and all kinds of stuff that you have to deal with. If you're a developer, you don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And if you're a small DevOps team, let's say in a startup or even a large enterprise has a small product group, for example, and they don't have maybe the team or the budget. And now with the COVID crisis, we are going to enter into I would say, fairly challenging economic situations going forward, with people, probably, have to work more with less. In situations like this, having an offering that takes off all the burden of day two operations would be a welcome thing, I would imagine. And we take care of all of that, right? So I was mentioning earlier about the management plane, which is really our secret sauce. That does all of this magic behind the scenes. It takes care of upgrades. Whenever there's a new version of Kubernetes that comes out, we do all of the testing behind the scenes, and we roll it out when it's ready. Security patches, there's all kinds of vulnerabilities that are being discovered all the time. Do you have the time to track all of that, make sure all of your clusters are patched at the right time? All of that work, operational work, you can basically not worry about anymore.
Got it. It's really interesting. I mean, in one hand, I don't think you would wish for this to happen, right? And you would have liked to have everyone working back to the way it was, and you roll this product out and you get to see it. On the other hand, you know what? Timing is everything in life, and it plays into this time anyway. Let's put it that way. Kamesh, what else is Platform 9 doing, around the community to help around with this whole, we're talking COVID, with what's going on out here?
Yeah, so just one other thing I wanted to mention, to your point around the timing. When we launched this, it's just been under a month, just over 4 weeks since we launched it. We've had hundreds of signups.
Really?
I don't know the last count, probably 600 plus
Really?
of people that have signed up for the free tier. And, we're also getting good feedback in terms of, what people are liking about it. And like I said, we have a Slack community channel where people can ask questions, they can get answers to any issues that they're running into. Again, in that spirit of, hey, you need some help, and it's not a enterprise, it's not a paid product, so it's and you still get Slack support, community support. So that's kind of what we're working towards, is to build that community and build a forum around people that want to use this free tier offering and kind of help each other, right? So if they want to try something like, I want to deploy a certain application, like a big data analytics, like a Kafka cluster, or I want to get a machine learning algorithm running on it, et cetera, et cetera. It's all free, so you can go try it out with the other open source technologies that are out there. And the forum will help people to help each other, right? So the idea would be, I tried this, it didn't work. Of course, our team is there from a Slack community, Slack support perspective. But having a forum where people can help each other is also a good thing. So we're kind of in the process of thinking through how we can enable that community as well.
Absolutely. Speaking of community Slack channels, Kamesh, I should mention, we have a community Slack set up here for TechStrong TV. It's techstrongtv.slack.com. Anybody watching, if you head over to techstrong.tv, you can put in your email address and it fires you off an invite to the Slack channel. Kamesh, I know you have some slides you had mentioned that are on point with this. Maybe we could put if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could put them up in our Slack channel for people to, if they want to dive in more. And I'm sure there'll be links there and everything else over to the Platform 9 information. So that, I'm still learning myself how to remember to use Slack and these tools that we're now in Zoom, that we're all relying on. So thanks for reminding me on that one.
Absolutely. To your earlier question about what else we're doing, one of the things that we found, quite by coincidence or by accident, if you will, is that our management plane that I was talking about earlier can actually manage hundreds and hundreds of disparate and diverse edge locations, right? That's just the architecture of the product, and the way we have built the SaaS offering allows us to deploy Kubernetes clusters across hundreds of locations. So, if you think about folks like retail companies that have hundreds and thousands of stores, or 5G telco companies that are rolling out 5G across hundreds of points of presence or cell towers. We found that our technology, in fact, we have had a very successful POC with a large retailer recently. We've been able to deploy across 10 stores, fairly quickly, much to their surprise, because they've been trying to do this for quite some time to try to see how they can centrally manage all of their retail locations from one place and roll out hardware and software updates, roll out containers, roll out virtual machines, manage their bare metal, etc. And we were able to show them, because of our unique SaaS architecture, we were able to show them that we can do that at scale. And this is something that's emerging, and I'm pretty sure you're seeing it too, Alan, is this edge computing thing seems to be taking off.
Yeah.
And we seem to be well positioned. We are well positioned, as a matter of fact, because of our architecture, to go serve that market as well, whether it's 5G or retailers. And the fact that we have both VM management with OpenStack, as well as container management with Kubernetes. And we also have a third offering, which is bare metal, right? So if you have a server that's sitting out there in some remote location and you want to manage it, right? So provision it, deploy an operating system to it, etc. We do that too. So soup to nuts, from the ground up, from a bare metal server up to a fully running containerized application or a VM-based application, we can automate that entire thing. And in fact, in this example that I just gave, with a retailer, we were able to get their store applications from the ground up. So let's say you take a server fresh from the factory, plug it into the power, plug it into the network, and then that server registers itself with our management plane, and from then on, everything is automated. And within 30 minutes, you've got your entire stack up and running, and people can start using it right away. So this is, I think, the next kind of generation of software-driven stores. And you could apply the same kind of technology to 5G. Similar situation, you have thousands of cell towers and point of presence. You have got packet core processing that's happening, etc. And you have the same challenges in terms of how do you manage all of these locations? What happens if something goes wrong? How do you troubleshoot issues at the edge? What if there's a new patch that I have to push out? Can I do that automatically? Can I use a CI/CD pipeline to do that? So having that single pane of glass that can basically cover your edge sites, your private cloud locations, your data center, as well as your public cloud is a huge deal, I think. It's the future.
Oh, absolutely. I think this whole edge computing and what's going to come to the edge. So I think 5G, in addition to being a benefactor of edge, is also an enabler of edge, right? And I think what we're going to see, when things get back to whatever the new normal is, right? We're going to see an explosion of the edge, maybe not akin to what we saw an explosion of the cloud, let's say from 2005 through 2007, when it really kind of burst on the scene. We're going to see a similar kind of move with the edge, right? Where people are going to start recognizing that what do we gain by moving computing to the edge? And then there'll be an equilibrium at some point, right? What makes sense to do in the cloud core, what makes sense to do on the edge, and how do they work together, right, to deliver just a better experience. I think that's going to be the story maybe in the next, this is going to unfold over the next 3 years.
Absolutely.
Right?
We're seeing that too.
Of what happens.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that too. And I think most of this, I would say the key driver for the edge is really data that's being generated out at the edge. So if you think about autonomous cars, which you could argue is still not there yet, but it might be a few years out. But a lot of data generated at the edge, whether that's autonomous cars, whether that is augmented reality, virtual reality, or whether that is smart stores, people that can do machine learning at a store to improve customer experiences, or for that matter, 5G, right? All of these things are driving the data towards the edge. And you need to do processing locally in order to get, because of latencies and bandwidth issues, et cetera. So you're absolutely right. We will probably end up seeing some sort of a balance, the pendulum kind of swinging between kind of the core data center and the public and the edge. And you need some way of bridging all of these disparate locations.
Yeah.
And that's really where we come in. We have a technology today that can do that.
Excellent. So I always say that the cloud wouldn't be the cloud without a couple of key megatrends: ubiquitous bandwidth, virtualization, right? There was no cloud without hypervisor and stuff like that, and mobile computing, right? Mobile devices. I think when we look at the edge, there are a couple of key megatrend enablers as well, 5G being one of them. The computing power available on the edge and being able to take care of it. But it's a very parallel, similar story. It's going to be interesting to how that plays out. Kamesh, I know we had more to cover, but we're about out of time. We try to keep these to 20 minutes, and we blew by that a while ago. I want to thank you, right? And thank Platform 9 for what they're doing. We're going to put up in the our Slack channel the slides, and maybe you can also, well, I'm sure you will, but send us the URL for the free tier of the Kubernetes. We'll get people maybe want to do that. And you know what? We're going to be here Monday to Friday every day. We're always looking to talk. Maybe we could have you back on in a couple weeks.
That'd be awesome. If we can probably show some of this stuff to your audience at some point.
We'll try to set it up. Let's hope maybe we're not all working from home by then, and things are kind of heading back the right way, flattening this curve. But Kamesh, let me say it right. Kamesh Penmaraju.
You got it.
You know what it is? You're up on a monitor way out there on me, and I even with my glasses, it doesn't work so good at that distance. But anyway, Kamesh, a pleasure to have you on. Best of luck. Say hello to all of our friends at Platform 9, and we'll see you soon. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
Coding is no longer just about creating new and innovative features. AppSec is a top priority, and agile organizations are looking for ways to win at security without slowing down their release cycles. This means reconfiguring our mindset and shifting security as far left as possible, the coding phase. Join us at the Secure Coding Virtual Summit by WhiteSource on April 23, 2020. Hear from industry-leading practitioners, analysts, and thought leaders from the AppSec and cybersecurity realm as they share their insights, principles, and best practices to achieve better, secure software. Visit securecoding.com for more information and to register.
You know, the folks at SNCC have just been on fire recently from, some very high-profile hirings, raising of money. They put on a very successful All the Talks virtual event, which raised, I think, almost $100,000 or maybe over $100,000 for COVID-19 charitable causes. They've really been just making news, but on top of that, also doing their business and helping us secure open source and helping developers with better security. In today's interview, I speak to SNCC co-founder and president, Guy Podjarny, who's going to give us 10 tips for secure coding from home. It's pretty interesting. Guy's an interesting guy. He always has a nice way of delivery, smart, and I think you'll enjoy this interview. So let's go now to Guy Podjarny, president and co-founder of SNCC.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Okay, as I mentioned, we're really happy to have the co-founder of SNCC, Guy, I forget, is it CTO or president?
President now. I've got this odd title.
Okay, the president of SNCC, Guy Podjarny. Guy, welcome. I don't really care what we call you. It's Guy. Welcome to TechStrong TV. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here.
Great. So, Guy, I guess, first of all, given current circumstances, I've asked how you are. You are well. How are things at SNCC? How are you guys coping with this kind of new reality we find ourselves living in, dystopia?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of the world is kind of turned upside down.
Uh-huh.
We're doing well. We're fortunate enough to have a company that is, first of all, from an employee perspective, is quite remote friendly and work from home friendly. Clearly this is weird reality for us as well, but it was easy to just sort of allocate some budgets to all the different employees to set themselves up at work, sort of at home, as well as, just do more virtual coffees and the likes. And we keep thinking we have this little care package, that we're thinking about sort of sending to everybody. So just sort of investing in well-being, but generally productivity hasn't really kind of been hindered. And we're also kind of fortunate enough to have kind of raised the big round, just at the beginning of the year. And so we have kind of a good cash balance, and we know that, we're not concerned about, sort of existential threats, and we can keep the business going. And so really we focused our attention a lot on how do we, keep the business running. We, as it stands, are sort of a product-led company and people buy it. But a lot of the businesses out there and individuals are not as fortunate. So we've done a lot of motions to try and kind of help out the rest of the world. So part of it is we ran this online conference called All the Talks. That was a fundraising
Yes.
event, and we raised $100,000 for COVID-19 related charities. And we also kind of allocated time for our employees to donate. We've given 6 months free for organizations in the distressed industries who can't kind of buy a lot at the moment, but they definitely don't want to wake up from a financial crisis to a crisis caused by a breach, right? So they can pick those up. So when you're, we've tried to always be community oriented, but I think we're in a position to kind of walk the walk a little bit right now and sort of help out the community with the content, help the customers, and it's going well so far as we kind of work with our employees and with our customers to sort of brave through this thing.
Sure. I mean, so this is certainly the time where you got to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? And the other thing that kind of just, bums me out about humanity is that in the middle of this crisis that we find ourselves in, there's no lack of bad people who are trying to exploit this, with phishing and breaching, just the usual cybersecurity craziness, right? But now at this time, you have more vulnerable people, more people working in different environments, and it's just like we need that, like we need an extra hole in the head, right? We got to worry about staying healthy, but now we have to also worry about our cyber hygiene and what's happening with that, and so we have to be extra vigilant. And it's just a sad reflection, I think, on the state of 21st century. But anyway, let me get off that soapbox. So, Guy, as you mentioned, all in all, things could be worse, right? I mean, here in the technology industry, we find ourselves, look, we can work from home, we can get it done. And though there have been plenty of layoffs and furloughs and, I imagine valuations and everything else will be affected here. Most people, I think, are working from home and getting used to it and making it happen. But it's one thing, look, if you're in marketing or finance or even sales, to work from home, you've got your thing. Doing development, right? And trying to keep up this, the whole continuous delivery kind of DevOps pattern of software development and releases. It wasn't really, I mean, I don't know about you, but I just never thought of it as a remote function, right? That, it's so collaborative. And so I think a lot of people are asking, how's that working, right? How do we make that work?
Yeah, and I think the good news is that a lot of the modern practices are far more oriented towards this type of more asynchronous development. So when you think about both development and sort of secure development, right? How do you not just sort of build software, but also kind of keep what you're building secure in this context? A lot of it really comes down to that kind of core principle of autonomy and empowerment. So when you have a bunch of people in a room and coordination alignment is there, if the build breaks or if there's a question to ask, you can much more easily kind of turn around, to the person next to you and get it resolved. It's much harder when everybody's working in their own place, so communication is a little bit more scattered, but also oftentimes asynchronously. You might have kids running around the background, there might be, like health distractions, unfortunately. So it's just, everything becomes a lot more asynchronous. And so the good news is that it's really a part of the ethos of DevOps and of sort of continuous development. And so we actually kind of put together, and we can talk about some sort of 10 tips, but to talk about how do you do secure coding while work from home, while remote. But really, a lot at the core of it is this notion of like ensuring that a developer or a security person, but notably a developer sort of sitting at home working, is as independent as can be, that you don't get in their way, that they are equipped to make good decisions because they need to make more of those decisions on their own than before, and that you have visibility into all of those activities on it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the 10 tips. Now you got me intrigued. If you don't mind, would you mind sharing the 10 tips with our audience? Let's run through them.
And we talked about, so we put this together in a cheat sheet. We like kind of trying to, as humans, it's nice to have some tips, and they're not fully comprehensive, of course. We're all unique snowflakes organizationally. But I think I'll kind of rattle off, and we'll talk about some specifics. So at the top, trying to kind of loosely sort of be in order of priority is indeed that empowerment of development. And so the first tip is ensure that developers know what good looks like. So empower developers with security guidelines. And it's so simple, but it's so often not done. Tell developers what good looks like, so they know which questions to ask. They know, what is building secure software. And you can't overhaul this overnight for your developers, but just put a cheat sheet in your own setup, right? To say, here are 10 questions you should ask. Here are some guidelines. Second is really around, don't needlessly break the build. I like the notion of testing pull requests. And so instead of finding a security problem in your application and therefore breaking the build because, hey, I just found a problem, which is the way an auditor would work, try to be more change set oriented. And the technical tool that you have in your hands is the pull request. And actually pull requests are fairly easy to integrate with. And run a test that tries to focus on finding a change that caused the problem. So say, hey, I ran the build last time. Maybe you remember those results. Maybe you can test the previous branch and test the new branch. And this set of code changes introduced the problem. In that case, totally legit. A developer has just introduced the problem. They just made a code change. They introduced a problem. You want to catch it. You want to break it. What you don't want to do is you don't want to break the build needlessly. It's always disruptive, and it's massively disruptive right now. And then I'll talk about the third, and I'll pause because they're all kind of, to me, a bit of a guidance, which is invest in visibility. Is throw some things, and again, we're a little bit in hacking mode. Like many of these things are investments later on, but take a bunch of tests that you could run in the pipeline and just funnel them into some sort of side data, into your Splunk, or into whatever it is that you sort of use for reporting, and just be able to track visibility into what's going on. And fundamentally, you can't empower without visibility. Like you're still a security expert, you're still sort of a security entity out there. And if you're not getting in the way, how do you know that something problematic happened? So this sort of first trio, if it makes sense, is really around empowerment, right? It's around, tell them what good looks like. Don't get in their way. Just kind of help them guide and focus when you actually break and interfere, and invest in visibility so you know what's going on.
Absolutely. So far, so good. Here, if you don't mind, I got a quick question. I think one of the things that and again, it's such a typical security thing, is, all right, so now we got people who are working from home, who are not used to working from home. And maybe they're using equipment, hardware they don't normally work on, right? They're using their son's computer, or they're sharing, or with the kids being home with school and your spouse, or something, you're sharing a computer, right? And so all of a sudden you have personal, and right. So I think part of that enablement is, can we give them a a standard platform or a standard configuration, something, to make sure that they're not coming into this with something that's already
perhaps
tampered
compromised
or sort of compromised. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right, and you think ahead, and so you're these are like later down our cheat sheet, but they definitely is.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. It's all good. It's like it's the other aspect of working from home is the network, and again, we're saved by the fact that the notion of not trusting a network, not trusting an endpoint, isn't something that has just been invented. And there's the whole concept of zero trust networks, Google's Beyond Corp, and so really what you want is, and we have a couple of tips over there as well, is to invest in that area. Now again, because it's an existing concept, there's a few things you can do. Of course, you can secure the endpoint and sort of invest in just security hygiene, ensure people are, put a mobile device management system in place, put a, like an antivirus or other endpoint security, require that on people's machines when they log into your network. From a coding perspective, the two primary things to invest in for developers are SSH security and multi-factor authentication. So, I mean, even if your system is compromised, the passwords, stealing the passwords is not as problematic. It is problematic on the spot if you're logged in and somebody's faking your activity. But what you definitely are not, like what you lose is the ability to track where did people log in from and be able to spot an anomaly. So you really need to reduce that dependence on password, because if somebody's passwords was stolen and an attacker is logging in from a different spot, like you're basically unable to detect that because your employees are all over the place. So you definitely want to enable multi-factor authentication. Good news is, again, most systems have it. You just need to turn on those settings in all these different, including on Git, including on NPM, all those environments. And the second that's related is for SSH security. We don't think about it, but developers have tremendous access to production systems. And oftentimes that access is done with an SSH, a simple SSH. And that SSH is a key that is a file that is stored on the system. And they just go off and they would SSH, and even if they SSH into what's called a jump box or a bastion, like a central server, and then they go on to SSH to production from there, which is often done for key management simplicity, it's still like an attacker that is on that machine can now SSH into that system and go on, because there's never really an authentication space. It happened one time, 2 years ago, when the developer set up their system and they put the key in there. So there are actually a variety of systems out there, a lot of tools. There's a open source one from Netflix called Bless. There's some commercial tools like Small Step is a cool startup that recently came out that has that solution. I think Okta has some things there. That what they do is like a user authentication bastion or jump box. So it allows, what it basically means is developers by default do not have access. They SSH, they can do. They need to go to some portal, authenticate with multi-factor authentication, request temporary access, self-serve, and then they go on and they SSH and they access. So if an attacker is on your machine, they don't have that access. Because while I'm concerned about your internal systems, I think the thing you should be most concerned is your customer data, right? So that SSH is there. So spot on, definitely security hygiene, multi-factor authentication and sort of SSH, and in general, that concept of zero trust network should be top of mind.
Good. I'm sorry I took you off track. Go ahead.
No. This was excellent. And it's spot on. And you're right. And I would say that these specific tips actually extend far beyond development. Like we tried to sort of focus the cheat sheets on security development while coding, but these ones, they're actually true to your marketers just as much as you are for your developers.
Sure.
The next kind of three that we have, this is kind of 4 to 6 on the cheat sheet, but they're not sorted. Really relates to the people, and again, this is not comprehensive, but I'd say 3 things that are especially important when we're in this sort of isolation orientation are skills, engagement, and celebrating successes. So first, skills. Skills is half an opportunity. A lot of your team would actually have more time on their hands right now. This is an opportunity for them to level up their skills. So ensure that you equip developers with security knowledge, buy a license to whatever, to whether it's a secure code warrior for an enterprise, or to sort of buy online content, Safari books and the likes, or your own content, Alan here. Get good content. Give developers opportunity to say, hey, can you level up? Can you learn security? But then also don't forget the other side, get your security people, they're going to need in this world of DevOps more and more coding skills. So put them on one of the many, many, many different coding tutorials out there and have that be a goal, come out of it stronger. So you definitely want to level up the skills. You want to increase security and development engagement. So security and development, like depending on your organization, developers oftentimes would avoid security. Hopefully you're not really in that state, but still the bar is higher when they need to reach out now explicitly. And you don't really have any visibility. You don't get any sort of hallway conversations. So really what you need is to initiate engagement. So put those in, book a sync meeting, open, do virtual office hours, for developers, have, it's now stand-ups, have security people come in if they're not doing it already into developer stand-ups once or twice a week. Think about when are the touch points where these two groups even see each other. Align the teams, right? So to figure out who in your security, if you haven't done it before, again, these are all good practices long-term. Take a security person from like every one of your AppSec people should be affiliated with, a number of development teams. And they should just make sure that they have a certain amount of touch points with them on a regular basis. And then the last bit of engagement, sorry, I'll kind of cut one more, is just that you celebrate wins. So as you engage, it's one thing to sort of do it, but look, we need to celebrate wins anytime. Security is such a dark thing sometimes, and people are, you only talk about it when it's broken and when a breach happens. People do good, make good security decisions all the time. Developers do. And what you really want is you want to celebrate it when that happens. Post a Slack message, send them a sticker, give them a whatever it is, like some virtual food delivery, like I was about to say, sort of a restaurant voucher, for that, maybe virtual. And this is more important than ever now, when everybody needs a little bit more of that sort of pep, a little bit more of that
positive reinforcement,
doing the right thing. So it's really all about those people.
Good, excellent. All right, so that's 6. So we've got 4 more. 7,
yeah,
8,
so
9,
we had a little bit, we fast forwarded before. So we talked about the 3 that were really about developer empowerment and kind of not disruptive and visibility. We talked about the 3 that are people oriented. And before that, we talked about zero trust networks and SSH. I've got 2 more. One is that security hygiene. I mentioned it before, but now is not the time to tackle fancy advanced persistent threats so much. When you talk about it, unfortunately, you said it right, Alan, that this is, history shows all the time. When people are most vulnerable, attackers raise their activity. And that's kind of where we're at. It happened at every crisis. It's, this one is no exception, and we're seeing that evidence all the time. So the attackers that jump on board, that increase their activities, it's not the nation states. It's more the common criminal. It's more the statistical tools that are floating around and are just trying to find all these indeed kind of unpatched systems at home and the likes. So I think now is the time to maybe reroute some cycles from that sort of, fancy, nation state protection that, maybe made sense in your priorities before. And really what you want right now is to really shore up your defenses in terms of your patching your systems, tracking these known vulnerabilities, ensuring configuration mistakes are well handled. Just really, really double down on those. And I'll end on one positive note. My last kind of bit of advice there is an opportunity, which is there's never been a better time to open a bug bounty program. And under that premise of when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. There are a lot of people more than before, unfortunately, who are sitting at home, and some of them, with more time on their hands, sometimes for unemployment, sometimes just because they're home. And they might be very interested in helping you find security flaws in your site, for a little bit of return there. So
absolutely,
I'm a fan of bug bounties as a whole, but if there was ever a time to open one up, now is it. So
absolutely, Guy. I think those. First of all, I like the way you organize them, right, into these groups.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are so dead on. I think there's another lesson here for security people, though, too, and that is we can't always pick our emergencies. Emergencies, or crazy stuff has a way of popping up before we had a chance to really plan for it. And so the lesson here is let's start planning, not just for this emergency, because there's only so much we can do, but what do we do for the next time, right? because I here's what I do, and we only have a few moments left, but I think there's going to be so much learned out of this experience, and there's going to be so much that doesn't go back to the way it was before. We may, this is going to forever change kind of the path of the river, right? And so what do we, what's going to change, and how do we try to anticipate the next thing, right? For me, sort of like VPNs and stuff, right? I think VPNs are going to be diminished because we're going to have more of the authentication kind of stuff you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just one thing. There'll be other things, but we need, as an industry, to start thinking about, all right, if we've got to change things on a dime, how do we do it, right? And we see it even on the TV and stuff. All these shows that are being shot remotely from people's houses. I see some very famous people, are here on wired earbuds. Other people have microphones. Other people have these things. I mean, it's crazy, but we need to make. If there was ever a reason to do continuity planning and business and emergency disaster planning,
yeah, now is the time. For sure. Yeah, you need to invest in security resilience. And look, I think the positive thing is if you did all of these 10 things and many of the examples that you point out, they are really good practices even when a crisis doesn't happen. So they help you be more nimble, they help you be more autonomous, they help you get more out of your people. So I think that's the sort of the glass half full piece, which is this gives us a bit of a kick in the butt, to sort of to get these done. And it might not be under the best circumstances, but we'll be better for it even when we do.
When we get to the other side,
get back to our sort of to something that is more similar to our previous reality.
I hope so. Anyway, Guy Po, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay well. Good luck with SNCC. We're going to try to get the PDF of this up on the broadcast of this. Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Hey, Guy Pojani, who is the president of SNCC here on TechStrong TV.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, back here in the studio again. As I mentioned in my opening, our selection from the vaults today, I feel like the crypt keeper. It goes all the way back to 2018, Seattle, KubeCon. I think this was really the first KubeCon where it went overboard, right? I don't want to say there was 5,000 or 7,000 people there. It was sold out. Anyway, and we had just recently launched Digital Anarchist at that point. In this interview, my Digital Anarchist co-founder, John Willis, sat down with none other than Kelsey Hightower to talk a little bit about cloud native Kubernetes the state of art at the time. And as I mentioned, it's really good with the lens of time looking back at this interview and to see how it's held up over the years. So let's go over to John Willis and Kelsey Hightower back in 2018.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, this is John Willis with Digital Anarchist. So having fun today, and I got a special guest right now, Kelsey Hightower. That's it, man, that's it. So Kelsey, instead of talking about all the things, so you've been a lighthouse for this, where we are today, right? Like the way you grabbed Kubernetes early, I gotta be careful. You're incredible evangelistic. In fact, jokingly, I think there's only one better evangelist on the planet than me.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'm full of crap, full of myself. But yeah, I mean, what you've done for this industry, which now looks like this next generation infrastructure, KubeCon, 8,000 people, you know, what you were talking about in the early days is kind of you yelling and screaming. But so instead of kind of working through that, let's go backwards. Like, what is like the tip of the spear right now? Like 2020, and I know, you know, you're going to be doing a keynote on Wednesday, but just like, let's work backwards. Like, what is the most interesting and where we should be and our industry should think about? And we've had conversations.
I think the industry in general is finally ready to embrace some of these opinions and patterns.
Okay.
You've seen it in programming languages with standard libraries and Go. This is how you do the web server. Okay. Now what we're starting to see, I think, on the cloud side, there's enough use cases being solved from these managed services. And it's not just cloud, it's any managed provider. Maybe we saw it with Salesforce, Gmail, DNS. Now we're starting to say managed databases, managed security protocols, or load balancers with Cloudflare and Fastly. These things are so good at this point. They're as good as some of the open source counterparts with all the features they have and now fully managed. People are now stepping back and says, hey, these are all the patterns I've been trying to learn or figure out over my whole career. I can get it with a button push. And guess what? I know the people who are working on the managed service. It's come full circle.
It's a maturity level now.
Maturity level, we're building things. We trust the people that are building the things. So now we're really saying, how do we glue this stuff together? And now we're all kind of focused on these pretty innovative platforms. Some people call those new platforms serverless, right? Don't necessarily deploy a thing, stitch together all the stuff that's out there and only do the glue. And whatever that glue that's left, we call it a function. So I think a lot of people now are starting to say, well, how far can I actually go when their platform does so much? We saw this in the mobile space. If you're on Android or Apple, you use their SDKs and you build any app you want, and there's a delivery model. We're seeing the same thing on the server side, and that's, to me, that's the tip of the iceberg. Now, we're unlocking all of these different use cases.
So this economy has gotten to maturity. We're like beyond PaaS and about SaaS, where it is almost atomic functionality at a level we can trust, right? And now it is more about, to your point, stitching those things together. You know, so it's interesting, like, somebody earlier had asked me, like, what do you think about serverless versus Kubernetes? And like, we could grunt on that question, right? But I said, well, you know, I don't know. There's people. So I said, go to your keynote on Wednesday. But I said, for me, Amazon Lambda is sort of an accident, right? Like it was a sticky note that started out as one thing, found some utility, and when people call it serverless and they try to compare that to like what's going on with native and stuff, I see more of Amazon as they just made all the API calls, you know, instead of writing code and having to deal with all the peripheral services in Amazon. Lambda just came in, and now it's like really easy to kind of event coordinate that.
It solves a lot of use cases. If you think about Heroku, imagine if Heroku would have had RDS and S3. Yeah. They didn't have all of that.
Right.
So the best they could do at that time is handle your compute part, right, but then you're kind of left on your own. We're now in the cloud era where you can get a platform from Cloudflare with Cloudflare Workers. You want to integrate with some Lambda stuff in AWS. Yeah. We got Google Functions. And it's not just compute though.
Right.
Some of the data platforms are the same way. BigQuery, that is the most serverless thing I've seen people use, right? It's like, I have some data and I know SQL. Put them together and that's all you do. So the number of platforms we have for specific use cases is just that rich.
So that was like kind of my question is like, what you're saying is all this is going to bubble up. So more than just...
Let's tackle the Kubernetes versus Lambda.
Okay.
This is like saying TCP versus a Cisco switch.
Okay, yeah.
I need TCP, I need Ethernet if I want to build my own switch.
Right.
But then you raise up a bit and say, I just need a networking device, then you'll look to someone that packages the whole thing. So yes, we do need a world like TCP is pretty open, Ethernet is a standard, Kubernetes is open, native is a standard way of thinking about that particular problem. And then someone will assemble that into a switch, AKA Pivotal Function Service, GKE. So I think people have to just look at the layers.
That's my point, is that what you're saying is the world we're about to get into is more like a global ability to think of things as functions that can spread across.
For that use case.
Okay.
And then for another use case where you want a long-running service, you may decide Fargate or App Engine. If you want to run a machine learning job, you use something like Cloud ML and you throw your TensorFlow job up there.
Yeah, so not all things being equal too. There's workloads that are function-based, there's workloads that are more static.
Exactly.
Okay. And so you were, all right, so let's work our way back then. All right, so the serverless, the function structure, Istio Envoy. So you gave me some real clarity, right? Like I'm like control plane, data plane, and the way you described Istio to me was like think of it as configuration management for Envoy, right?
Yeah, so we know if we want to make the network plane programmable, we like some of these ideas of traffic shaping. Send 50% of traffic to V1, send 50% of traffic to V2. I could do that with Nginx actually. I can take Nginx, write an Nginx config, and say this backend goes here, this backend goes here, maybe find a little module. I can do it. That's a very clear pattern. So you look at Envoy, it was kind of purpose-built to do exactly that. So when you look at its config file language, it's like, yeah, I know how to split traffic. So then you look at it and say, well, I could write an Envoy config by hand. I've done that. But then how do you integrate with Kubernetes where things are moving around all the time? You're not sure where to put Envoy. So when you combine the two and you start to say, maybe we inject Envoy right next to the container when it deploys. And then maybe we have a high-level language that says, here's what these rules mean at a high level of detail. Then you end up with Istio, which is that control plane and a way of constructing those things together.
That was the best description for me to understand that. And then I guess I'm kind of jumping around now. So the other thing that is kind of fascinates me now is the whole kind of API extensibility, or somebody would just say I created a CRD and all that. And it seems to me, I haven't written one. So I've researched it. I'm an evangelist, right? Like I'm not as good an evangelist as you. I do some technical stuff, but like I haven't sat down and wrote but it seems to me there's a sort of unicorn and
so think about it this way, like Puppet Chef and Ansible.
Yeah.
Out of the box they gave you some primitives, file package service. But what if you wanted to do an abstraction for an internal process? The beautiful thing about config management was you can write a custom module and expose it in the DSL. So you're doing Puppet, I can go and say, I've made a foobar thing, and it takes these 5 parameters. And that's what made it blow up.
Right.
You can almost solve every problem, and you start to say, now we're puppetizing things.
Right.
In the Kubernetes world, it runs containers. So on the surface, doing nothing else, it's a it runs containers, you can put a load balancer, maybe do some storage. That's what it is. But let's say you want to get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. You can now write a CRD that says, tell me the domain and what service it binds to, and describe it, and then you do all the work in the control loop. It's very similar to the same modules we wrote in Puppet, except for it's even more declarative because of how the API works. So those become custom resource definitions, right? So instead of writing Ruby, we're writing custom resource definitions and a control loop.
So like from the chef perspective, lightweight resource provider, you create your own config, and now it's a primitive, now you can...
So you know the principles.
Yeah.
So if you take the principles from config management and you apply it to Kubernetes, things start...
But so is there like some, all right, so from the outside looking in, there's some inherent magic in that, the fact that this is, people, some people get yelled at like, you don't really know what Kubernetes is, it's really just a massive event loop processor, right? And help me tell the rest of the world this before you yell at me. But like that, isn't that some of the things I think that are really interesting, exciting, and more people should research and learn how to do CRDs, not just because you can create these custom primitives, which is cool, but because underlying there's this massively scalable event loop that can process things at milliseconds. Am I on the right target?
Yeah, so if you think about the pattern, so I actually was in, maybe it was Oslo, and I had dinner with Mark Burris. We know him.
Yeah.
And Promise Theory, I remember showing him Kubernetes in earnest.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, that's a lot closer to Promise Theory. This idea that I have a declarative interface. So let's talk about Kubernetes from this point. The Kubernetes API server does nothing. You can give it stuff and it puts it in etcd. By itself, it does nothing.
That's funny. Okay, yeah.
If you add a scheduler that reads one of those objects and says, I should do some placement, it will do a placement inside the API server and nothing will happen. You can add in Docker and the kubelet and it can watch the API server and it decides that scheduler binding and it will pull a container. That's what makes it this container platform today, and that's why we gave it the name Kubernetes. But let's say you wanted to build a CI/CD system. You could build a CRD, custom resource definition, that says, get code from GitHub, step 1, do this build, step 2, and then put it in Kubernetes, and then Kubernetes will watch for GitHub changes, but you still have to build all the logic. There's no magic here, but now we have a framework. Now we know how to declare an API, how to version the API. It gets stored in etcd. There's RBAC around it. And then control loops can watch the API server, and the API server will tell you someone's added a new object. That's all it is. It's a framework.
But that's cool, though, right?
It's cool as hell.
If everything starts running as a Kubernetes cluster, then you're in the game, right?
And it feels first class.
Yeah.
It's not a secondary thing running as a bash script. It feels first class, and then it's easy to share.
So is there a unicorn horse problem right now? Like I hear that, like to do this stuff, you really need no distributed computing, or is it just kind of bullcrap?
You don't need to know distributed computing because distributed computing is hard.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right? etcd hides a lot of distributed computing from people by giving us a way to have consistency at the state level.
Right.
Kubernetes adds an API on top by saying, let's give people an easy way to understand the relationships between these objects by leveraging a very strong distributed system. So you at the very top, input an object, watch for it to change, act on the change, add state back.
So I guess I'm getting at, though, is it malleable enough for the general people at this point, or do we have to wait till like there's some set of DSL?
If you want to learn how to run Kubernetes, understanding how distributed systems fail will be very helpful to a cluster administrator. It's going to fail in weird ways.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Yeah.
If you're a developer and someone is doing a great job of running a cluster for you, you do not need to understand a distributed system.
And you just need to have to create your own custom resource.
Like DNS, do you need to understand how to...
But I guess I'm being redundant, but is today for somebody to come off and be a sysadmin, is it relatively easy for them to create access control, or
I don't want to say easy because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, okay.
But most sysadmins you've been dealing with binds, MySQL. It's been a mess for so long.
Yeah, okay.
Like you just need to learn a new set of things. So I'm going to say there's a learning curve that's going to require you to understand a few new concepts, and once you do, they start to repay back on dividends.
So you want to talk about SRE for a little bit?
Yeah.
That's a good subject. So we had a great conversation over the holidays, right? And I get, I didn't really understand SRE until we had this conversation, right? I read the book, Era Budgeting, and all this stuff. And at one point we had this conversation about, like, and help me if I'm not describing it, I use my own narrative, but like this, like almost brick wall, right? You come to, whether it's Google, whoever, I come up with an application. I have to have certain ways to say I can manage it and evidence it. And then in kind of a Google way, which should be the SRE way, is I negotiate an SLO, right? We get all that kind of worked out, right? And error budgeting and all that. But the real thing is I'm handing it over to this over the wall in a sense. And I kind of lose, and I don't care about like the joke with like, I create an application, you're SRE, I'm like a build run team. You tell me I got to put my application with all these control points. We have a negotiation, we come in SLO, I give it to you, and I'm like, hey, Kelsey, are you going to run it on Google Cloud or Amazon? You're like, sorry, you don't get to ask that
question. Let's talk
question.
about site reliability. To me, it isn't just one group doing something for everyone else.
Right.
It's an engineering practice that starts to leak out and just becomes part of the platform even. So if I'm an SRE and I say, everyone has to do metrics, I can keep having one-off conversations with everyone that's writing something and do one-offs. Or I can say, you know what? We're going to do /metrics. Everyone's going to have an endpoint called /metrics. I know it ain't going to be perfect, but what things do you care about? Well, I care about response times. Okay, when you launch, your /metrics needs to yield the response time. I already have a system to collect that. If you do /metrics, I promise you, we don't need to sit down at every deployment. I will find your app and I will scrape it and I will tell you that you're not meeting the SLO because now we understand the cost of not meeting it, right? And that to me is an engineering practice that then, as an engineer, you say, oh no, we do. As a code review, where's your metrics endpoint? That's not gonna work in the system. We won't be able to leverage everything the SREs have built over time. Then it becomes cultural. So the SREs are like trying to figure out how to make the platform even better to use by default. So then it feels like magic. It feels like I can build a new app, put /metrics, deploy it, and somehow my metrics are ready to go.
And that's my point. Like, the pushback is like, why do you care how we give it to you, right? Like, we got our agreement. I'm going to give it to you. So like we start use now focus on all the things you didn't really care about.
Let's collaborate on hard stuff like there's a CPU bug that's slowing things down every billionth clock cycle. And we found it through all of this noise of metrics, and it turns out the library you're using is triggering this bug. So as an SRE, we had to go work with Intel. We had to go work with some library people. That's valuable.
Yeah, and all across this whole spectrum, right? Like, you don't want to be in that game, right? Give us this, and we'll take care of it. Yeah, no, brilliant. So you want to talk a little about your, this will air way after your, you want to talk about your keynote?
Yeah, so my keynote, I'm going to so I personally put my hands on a lot of the tech. I try to forget all the stuff I think I know and say, all right, why are people excited about this new thing? Can I get excited about this new thing, even if it's a thing that I didn't build or Google didn't build? And right now I'm looking at things like Lambda and saying, why is it useful? And if you look at the whole context of why it's useful, there's a lot of things around it that make it useful. So my goal is, let me put my hands on it. Turns out Google has similar things that are useful, but why is Lambda useful? And then I try to figure out what the delta is between Kubernetes, the thing I know, and Lambda, the thing I don't know.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then the goal is to say, all right, play with it for long enough, and can I explain it in a way live? If I show you a piece of code in Kubernetes, how much is really required to make it get value from here, and can I go back? I think if people see that there's not a big difference between these two, for example, in Kubernetes, most users use managed services. You use a managed load balancer, you use a managed object store, and a managed database. You're an 80% serverless.
Right.
Maybe the Kubernetes compute part maybe is not considered serverless. So then the delta between you going from a container being managed in Kubernetes to a subset of a function being managed in Lambda using the exact same services, maybe you get to 100% serverless. So now we need to have better conversations about where are you on that scale and why does it matter? What's the trade-off? And I think that's what's important. So my goal is, let's not fight serverless versus Kubernetes. That's a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, waste.
You can use Docker to build serverless zip files. There's a lot of value in that, and I show that to people in the service community. They're like, oh, that's amazing. So you mean I can have Docker tee it all up and then spit out a zip file that I upload to Lambda? Exactly.
Right.
On the Lambda side, it's real nice to know that we have a really strict interface with events. I can do that on Kubernetes. It changes the way I even write Kubernetes code.
So I guess then to kind of, for me to glue it all together, and I think this is probably a challenge, like, we have to get people to think at a higher abstraction layer, right? Which is, like, whether it's serverless or it's Lambda versus Knative, or I never know it's native or Knative or
Knative.
Knative. All right, good. So, like, and we've had these conversations where you say you walk into companies and you say, like, we just want to get this done, right? And so, if I'm getting this right, it is this world that we could get to where people stop thinking about all the other stuff, and they have sort of, like, to your point is, do you really care whether it's Lambda or Kubernetes if the things that you need to do are exactly the same, and there's an abstraction that allows you to do that? And I guess my question is, how do we get everybody to think like that? Because we're here and, like, we're actually like lambs in the slaughter, the Kubernetes right now, right? Which is forcing us to think down it.
It depends on who you are. I met some developers that say, Kelsey, I just want to run this code. I said, check out App Engine. What about Kubernetes? I'm like, you check out App Engine.
Yeah.
Does it work for you?
Right.
You might be lucky enough that you can just stop. Now, if you're a person that's providing an advisement to your organization, look at all these high-level abstractions and say, what are they abstracting?
Right.
What am I trading off? That's all we need to get to. Then we can actually have a conversation. For this workload, that's the right abstraction.
Right.
For this one, this is the right one. The problem is most people say, don't worry about it. When you say don't worry about it, how can you do the comparison?
And then we sort of get religious too, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you walk in and say, don't tell me about all these things. Tell me what you want to do, and we'll figure out the best
Let's
thing.
not say multi-cloud. Let's say two providers that have networking in between. What's the cost of that networking? What's the security story around that networking? We answer those questions, you can slap multi-cloud on there after we get that through.
So what else? What did I miss? What did I miss here?
I think, honestly, in this space, we're at KubeCon, CNCF. There's all these projects. There's this crazy landscape. Everyone thinks they need everything, every logo that they see. Oh, wow, there's 150 logos. Let me figure out how to use all 150 of those.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. Scary.
Go back to the old school engineering stuff. Like, figure out what you're trying to do. Talk to people and say, hey, all I'm trying to do is X. What are these things can help me? Here's what I'm doing now. and learn how to say, I don't know. I don't know how to do microservices, even though I'm trying. Any help you can give. And I think that's really what the core of this conference is about. Talk about solutions we have, and do they map to your problems?
Awesome, man.
Good, thank you.
I think, guys, we're good. Thank you.
Awesome.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Okay, everyone. That was a great interview with John and Kelsey. I enjoyed listening to it. But now it's time for the news. Let me tell you some of the headlines as usual. I'm going to hit a few in each of our main sites, but it's not meant to be exhaustive. I really encourage you to either sign up for our newsletter or go visit the sites yourself, because there's so much more in there. There's something for everyone. While I'm sending you places, remember on TechStrong TV, if you sign up with your email, send you an invite to our Slack channel. We'd love to hear your suggestions, thoughts, comments, what you'd like to see, and we could do that. But now the news. On Security Boulevard, two articles I wanted to highlight for you. One is internal fraud is surging during COVID-19. A little bit of Captain Obvious, right? But here's why. I can give you the really short answer to that one too. Why? Why did dogs do what they do? Because there's an opportunity for criminals to make a lot of money here. It's unfortunate. It's the world we live in, and it's why we can't have nice things. But there's more to it than that. You should read the article and check it out. Also on Security Boulevard, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole Dark Overlord ring and thing going on. But interestingly, an insurance client is now suing a small law firm for making a $1.5 million Dark Overlord payment. And this could have repercussions as a precedent here, so it's a case worth watching. You should check that out. On Container Journal, we have observability, solving the hidden cost of Kubernetes applications. So I don't know if we truly understand the hidden cost of Kubernetes applications yet as we work through the security of them and everything else. But it's a good article, and it takes a great stab at it. You should check it out. Also, VMware expands the Tanzu portfolio. VMware is all in on cloud native Kubernetes and Tanzu and via Tanzu, and they're going to be expanding that today. Check out the story. Over on DevOps.com, we have a good article on right sizing to reduce your AWS costs now. It's from my friend JT Geary, who is we've done a lot of podcasts all with them, and really they're a premier Amazon partner, and you should check out JT's article on there. And then also we have top iOS security gotchas. Now, why is that on DevOps.com, you ask? Well, that's a good question. I asked Charlene myself. But really, these are security gotchas aimed at iOS developers, and that's why we have it in there, using technologies and APIs. So check that out. Another item it's in DevOps.com, but it's part of our IT as Code section, is accelerating IoT by switching gears to 5G. So 5G doesn't cause coronavirus or COVID, so let's get that out of the way. And it's coming, and it's going to be a game changer, and this is why you need to switch gears with it. So that's it on the news for today. As I said, it's just a few of the articles that are on Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and DevOps.com. Check them out, and there's a lot more there as well, so enjoy that, and We'll be back with more news. But for now, it's that time of the day where we turn things over to Media Ops Managing Editor Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene has some great segments today for you as well.
This is Digital Anarchist at DevOps Enterprise Summit, Las Vegas, 2019.
Welcome back. This is Charlene O'Hanlon with DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, and Digital Anarchist TV. And we are at DevOps Enterprise Summit 2019 here in Las Vegas, having some really great conversations, as always. And having some really interesting conversations specifically about value stream management. And our my next guests, David Rizzo and David Kennedy, both from CompuWare, are here at the event, and they are going to be talking about value stream management in one of their sessions this week. But welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you
so
for
glad
having
to
us.
see you. I'm so glad that everybody made it here okay. So value stream management. We've had a couple conversations with a couple interviews so far on value stream management, and it seems to be the hot topic this year.
It is. It does seem to be the hot topic, and value streams are becoming very relevant, and everyone is realizing that there is a need for them. In the past, if you go back 2, 3, 4 years, when you talk about DevOps Enterprise Summit being started, and they talked about it was getting started and having an idea, and then the question becomes, how do you show value for that idea? How do you know that what you're doing is more than just a good feeling? When they talk about how many builds are done, how many deploys are done, how many Kubernetes clusters they're using, what does that mean to your business? Because ultimately, when you have to go back to your business and say, we're going to be spending this for this project, what do I get for that? So you can't just implement DevOps and say you're going to improve business value. You have to show business value, and that's what we've done at CompuWare. We have created value streams for all of our workload, and we have created key metrics that show how we're providing value in those value streams.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting thought because, to your point, you can't just go and say we're going to implement DevOps and life is going to be wonderful after that. But DevOps is a journey, so it's really hard to show that DevOps is actually producing results, if you will. And so I guess value stream management is one way to actually kind of put the pedal to the metal, if you will, and show that there are results that are being derived from DevOps processes. Am I right?
You are right.
Okay, yay, I'm right.
you have to understand what you're doing. And it's good when, there's something that has to be done within your organization, and people pick and say, we're going to do DevOps, but then what does that really mean? What are you trying to improve? And the only way you can know what you're trying to improve is actually draw out those value stream maps, draw out what you're going to be trying to improve.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, in the session so far this morning, many of the speakers are talking about metrics are table stakes, but value streams really being the evolution of that and drawing out those value streams, putting things together so you can see flow through the organization. And that's when it really starts to matter.
So how did you guys kind of get started on your value stream management journey within your organization? Was it something that you just decided that the only way that people were really going to embrace DevOps or embrace this way of working was to see that it actually can produce results? Or how did you guys get started doing it?
So it was actually sort of after we started doing DevOps.
Okay.
We implemented Agile, we started doing DevOps, and then came, when I talk within the organization and say, from an engineering perspective, we're doing better, we're doing more, we're delivering more, but then I'm asked, how do you know that? Mm-hmm. And how do you show value? And we started coming up with metrics, and we have a whole platform where we do metrics, we derive metrics, and because we're a software vendor, we've actually made this available to our customers that they can use it for their metrics. But once we started doing metrics, we said we have to make sure we're aligning that with what's happening in the business. So it's not just pulling out metrics because data, we have a lot of data.
Right.
And we saw some of that this morning from Adidas. They had an opening
session this morning, and they talked about some metrics, and they're pulling out a lot of metrics. You can fill up screens with numbers, sure, but how do they relate to the business? And that's what actually drove us to say we need to make sure we're aligned with our value stream and our business objectives. So then we started doing the value stream mapping and put that and making sure those KPIs match to what the KPIs we were really showing.
I think a huge driver for us as an organization to become better is a common understanding, a common definition. When we think of velocity, quality, and efficiency of software, if you go to anyone in the organization and ask them, what does that mean to you, you would get the same response from everyone. So you have a common place to go that has a common definition. So when you see a number move up or down, you know what that means and potentially know what to do about it to make it better or improve upon it or keep it consistent, right? Some of these you just want to not move at all, right? Not everything can get better.
So how long has it taken you guys then to kind of create this value stream map and really embrace it within your organization?
So we started about a year ago,
okay,
and some of that was inspired actually by the DevOps Enterprise Summit. Dr. Mick Kirsten, his book, he and Gene have actually been to CompuWare and visited us, but that value stream and some of that was inspired by his book, and we started working on it. And it didn't take us long to put our value stream together. It's continually evolving, so we never say we're done. But we started earlier this year where we actually go through our value stream, the KPIs that match our value stream every quarter, because we deliver our software, we deliver once a quarter, because that's the rate at which our customers can consume it. So first business day of every quarter, we launch updates to our technology. And we go back every quarter and look using the value stream and the KPIs to review our business. And we also look at our business metrics. Okay. What are our customers using? What have we sold? Those types of things. So we match it to the technology and the business. We sit in a room and go over it for each runs of our business.
Do you think that has helped your organization as a whole kind of embrace the DevOps processes and the way of working, so to speak?
I think in my experience so far, working with the platform and having the conversations with the development managers that are consuming these KPIs, the relationships are stronger, right? Okay. We have a common understanding. We know how everyone works in the organization, and everyone has their different ways of implementing their value streams and tracking this progress. So yeah, with those relationships stronger, you really get to know the development and engineering business. And I think we're coming together as a stronger community within the organization around being better.
That's great. So what's been the hard part about it, though? I mean, I imagine it's not been smooth sailing the entire time.
Everything's simple. You just do it. The hardest part is always facing reality. Yeah. If a lot of times when you talk about how companies are doing, companies send out surveys, and you get survey data. Well, if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm always doing better today than I was yesterday. If I implemented a change and we started working differently, it's going well. It's very rare that people will be very hard on themselves. So if you're asking the practitioners, and now when we asked the practitioners a year and a half ago, how's it going? We're doing great. Now we have numbers. We say, well, you're not really great. And that's the hardest part, is when you put real numbers in front of people, now they have to face the truth that, we aren't doing this exactly right. And that's hard at first. Right. And that's something we have put in our culture is learn from your mistakes. Failure's okay as long as you learn from it and try not to repeat it. But that's probably the hardest part as you start really putting things down on paper. Right? As you put a value stream and you realize, you have an individual that's responsible for, the build process running, right? Now we have a lot of automation, but if a piece of that automation fails, they're the bottleneck to it delivering value to the organization. Now they see that on the wall, and they know it in the back of their head, right, but when you put it on the wall and say, this is, you're the one, and this is the number that, it failed 3 times last week, and you have to keep it moving. I think that's the hardest part for people is accepting reality.
Right, yeah. I imagine just, understanding their place in the organization as a whole and how it does impact everybody else in the organization. I think that sometimes that can be a tough reality to face, for sure. So, so when again is your presentation?
5:35 on Tuesday afternoon.
Okay. Will you be serving drinks at that point?
We were thinking about it. We will have a lot of fun with it. We know we're late in the day, but we're putting a lot out there to have people come, and we have a booth in the trade show, encouraging them to come visit us because we have something that people are looking for, and what we've done, anybody could potentially do because we're using some very common technology that could be implemented, but we've put it all together in a way that allows you to see business reality.
That's great. And I know your CEO is going to be here tomorrow too, correct?
Our CEO, Chris O'Malley, and CFO, Joe Aho, will be doing a fireside chat with Gene Kim early Tuesday morning to share, and that's the business side of it truly, from the CFO and CEO, how they work together and how, from a financial aspect and business aspect, what we're doing is benefiting the business and how we can demonstrate it.
Well, we've heard a lot about value stream management so far. It's great to see that you guys are actually putting it into action and you're seeing results. So kudos to you, and I'm sure your customers are getting a lot out of it too if you're making it available to them as well. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your story about value stream management, and I look forward to the presentation tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So I just want to remind the audience real quick, we have many more interviews coming up over the course of the next few days, and you can see them all over on digitalanarchist.live, I think it is. And it's also going to be streaming live on Facebook as well as DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And there's probably one other place that it's streaming that I'm forgetting right now. But no worry, just go to Facebook. You can find it there. Again, this is Charlene O'Hanlon. Thanks for joining me, and stay tuned for more interviews.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
All righty. Thanks, Charlene. Great segment. Moving our show right along today. Now it's time to head over to the Music with Mitch, right, at the Analyst Corner. Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell has some great segments for us. Mitch, over to you.
I'd like to start the week out by talking about the economic crisis that we're in. You know, are we in the beginnings and still kind of feeling out how bad this is going to be, or where it's going to go? Are we starting to get to the middle? I mean, it's hard to tell as we have talks about reopening up our government, our businesses, our economy. So we're probably more towards the beginning than anywhere else. Of course, we want to look to the future. What's going to look like? What do we have to do to get through this? What's the new normal? All of that. I think it's also important to learn some lessons from the past, as well as think about the future. You know, typical reactions I remember going through previous downturns is you've got to stabilize the business. You have to have access to cash, liquidity, lines of credit, things like that. Also, what do you cut back on? You may have some layoffs going on, but also, are you going to cut the marketing budget? Are you going to slash and burn, or how much do you get aggressive about that? And of course, I think some of those experiences have shown that being overly aggressive also costs something on the other side. As I was thinking where we are today, I remember one of the experiences, and oftentimes I'll refer to the economic downturn after 9/11 and also after the housing crisis of 2008. There's a really good study that came out of the Boston Consulting Group, and Harvard Business Review did a nice write-up about it. I went back and pulled that out. Some interesting lessons that they learned for companies as they went through that process. Things like doing scenario planning. Think about it. What's a modest downturn? It's more severe, full-blown depression. Probably we aren't going to have a modest, I think we know that, but maybe there's levels of severe plus a depression. What does that look like? Running simulations. What sales volume is going to happen? What's pricing, variable costs, fixed costs, and where you might shed non-strategic or really valuable businesses or products or lines of business that you're in. Of course, there's also a view around doubling down on some areas, maybe tripling down on things like investment in R&D, product development, understanding your customers, creating those digital experiences. From that study, one of the interesting things they noted was from 2001 to 2003, Apple increased their R&D by 13%, which was it got them to 8% of sales, and they maintained that through all that 3-year period. Of course, from that came the iPod and a number of different products, eventually leading to the iPhone. There's also looking at competitors, who's going to be around. We also have access to greater pool of talent. We were all fighting to get the best talent that we could, and it was kind of a seller's market for talent. Well, unfortunate for folks that experience job loss, but that also means businesses have access to more talent and can create and find people to bring into the company to fill those jobs. And lastly, of course, rethinking business models, and I've talked about that, product experiences, customer experiences, et cetera. So what's new about our situation? Well, you could probably point to lots of things, but I think one of the biggest factors in today is our investment in digital transformation and what that can enable our businesses to do. You've heard me talk about some of the experiences I've had that have become curbless delivery, interactions through mobile applications, instead of going into a shop or a store, things like that. And those happened very quickly. They didn't happen in months and quarters. They happened in weeks and days. So what might the new normal look like? We talk a lot about remote work and the continuation of that and how prevalent that will be. Certainly less reliance on travel, hopping on planes. Productivity gains from that could be significant. I'm not saying we're not going to do any traveling, but maybe we're just not as apt to jump on a plane right away, especially if they're still concerned around safety as different global economies recover and deal with their respective health crises. There's also shifting to this digital economy, and who knows, this downturn may drastically accelerate that. So increasing our use of digital payment systems and delivery of services. We've already seen in healthcare where people aren't going to the hospital, aren't going to the doctor necessarily. They're doing it all digitally. We have lots of digital entertainment, but information, sports even, will become less reliant on being in big arenas with other people. Certainly using a lot more video, a great deal more of our local ISP services, the cable networks, the fiber networks, the reliance on delivery services, all kinds of things that help us maintain that contactless or social distancing experiences. I suspect that'll carry with us for some time. So there is hope, there is opportunity. And at the same time, we have tragic loss of life due to COVID-19 and the resulting financial impact and pain for people and their loss of income and jobs, and businesses as they have to make some pretty serious adjustments and maybe even face getting out of business, losing their businesses. But keep up hope, in creating those scenarios and thinking about what futures can be and how we can not only react, but also accelerate our path to that, leverage our digital investment. Think about ways that you might double down, even triple down and leverage that digital transformation. Now, you may not be very far on your journey. Maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're really got this down pat, and it's going to be a huge asset for you. Maybe even determining who the winners and losers are. But there's no time like the present. Invest in that R&D, invest in people and their capabilities, and invest in the organization's ability to maximize and deliver that. While at the same time, we're dealing with a lot of the instability and uncertainty of the current situation. So let's look to a brighter future. Let's create that future together where we have a much more agile and business and our ability to experiment and create those futures. So I wish you all the best. Again, let's learn some lessons from the past while at the same time leveraging what's new and exciting about how we can create business opportunities, experiences for our customers, and jobs for people in the future. I wish you the best.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Hi, Mitch Ashley. I'm here with Danny Winokur, who is the GM at AppDynamics, and we're talking about coronavirus and some of the impacts, some of the uses, some of the ties to the future of work, future of business, as both we deal with the current lockdown situation, but also businesses are dealing with economic impact and what it'll look like on the other side of that. So good to have you interviewing you today, Danny.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Mitch.
Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself? If people don't know you or don't know a little bit about AppDynamics, tell us about that too.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I'm the general manager of the AppDynamics business. We're a part of Cisco Systems, and I've been with the company myself for about 4 years, which was a year before Cisco acquired us. And we go back about 12 years and are the leading provider of what we call application performance management solutions. And so technology that many of the largest brands and enterprises in the world are using to instrument and monitor their broad application estates. So basically all of the nodes, components, and dependencies that their core applications rely upon in order to run in a performant way and deliver fantastic experiences for the users of those applications, whether they're inside the company as employees or externally with the customers that they now interact with increasingly in a digital domain.
Mm-hmm. Super helpful to have some data to try to understand what the experience of your customers is. So fantastic.
Critical.
Cool space to be in. So let's talk a little bit, and I think I told you ahead of time, just some of the things we've been looking at through accelerated strategies and some of the research we're doing around COVID-19, both lockdown and economic impact and kind of post coming out of that. What's your perspective on, the digital services, cloud services, technology, and the role that's playing in the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, even prior to this whole pandemic and everybody working from home, there was a lot of focus on digital transformation, people using digital technologies, applications as a way to interact. And I think that, with the pandemic and with work from home, we've obviously seen a dramatic further acceleration of those trends that had already begun. And so, as we work with customers and large enterprise organizations around the world, it's evident to us in working with them that in the context of this pandemic, a lot of initiatives and efforts that they already in many cases had begun have now just accelerated. They're relying on applications that they use to conduct business internally, that their employees use to actually run the internal operations of their organizations. Even more, because obviously everybody's working from home. And so the primary method of connecting into the business, of course, is all through applications. And of course, it's also become an even greater way that they now depend upon in interacting with their customers, with their partners, with their external stakeholders as well, in order to transact, conduct business, deliver products and services. All of that is happening, obviously, in a digital arena. And at the very heart of that digital arena our applications. That of course is sort of the organizing unit around which customers or partners or external stakeholders interact with a company. And so we see the work from home context as accelerating those efforts, and I expect that will have lasting impact because
I agree with you there.
Yeah, the progress that's being made during this time is not going to obviously all just recede and go away. When things open back up and even when people are a little bit more free to connect with each other in person, I expect we'll continue to see a lot of use of the digital technologies for the benefits that they do offer, and those, like I said, I think are being accelerated right now.
Well, and many folks, myself included, think it'll be a slow roll, kind of phased, going back even to folks going back to work, and we have some data around how many people actually would still prefer to work from home, at least some, maybe quite a few days per week. So let me ask, do you have some access, kind of anonymized access to data around your customers and some of the performance that you're seeing? Or is this more interacting with your customers and what they're telling you as they use your products and services about what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, we have some anonymized access to data with respect to the customers that use our solution in SaaS. So we have two deliveries of the way that we deliver App Dynamics. One is where we operate it on behalf of the customer as a SaaS offering, and then we also deliver the software for on-premises use within the customer's own data center. And so we have a mix of customers using both of those things. Most of the data that I'm sharing with you now is from live direct interaction that our global sales organization and our services and delivery organizations are having with customers. And then we will be able to tap into at least the SaaS part of our offering to get updated data for at least that subset of our customers.
Great. I'm excited to hear. Tell us what your sales folks are hearing from customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing right now. Obviously, the way I think about it is in phases. The first phase of this, I would say, was everybody just sort of going through the shock of the new reality and implementing things that I would maybe broadly classify as just business continuity priorities, right? Like everyone's suddenly working from home. What are the minimal emergency things that need to happen in order for, in many cases, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees in some large organizations to be able to connect and work from home tomorrow morning, right? And so that becomes obviously the most immediate business continuity need. And then as a few weeks have gone on and some of those needs are addressed, we see companies then sort of turning to the next phase of, okay, we're operating. What does this mean for how we're going to operate over the medium term? With the expectation that we may be, that we may be in this situation for months, to at least some degree. And then what is the longer term plan that we want to put in place for a post-pandemic, a post-lockdown reality, with the expectation that it won't be exactly the same as things were before this happened.
New normal won't be the old normal.
Exactly. So we'll have a new normal, and APM and the monitoring capabilities that we provide, the business insights that we provide with technologies that we have like Business IQ, which gives you business data out of your applications. Those things are things that we're starting to see real focus on as you look at sort of the second and third phase more than the first phase. The first phase is, like I said, just business continuity, connect people up, take care of those immediate and urgent needs.
Email, video conferencing, collaboration tools, access to internal data systems they need to keep working.
Exactly.
The basics, if you want to think
basic connectivity. That's exactly right. Your VPNs, your basic security, your basic video conferencing capabilities, and in some organizations, making sure people have laptops and network access, right? So it varies organization to organization, geography by geography, but some of them don't have even those basics in place. So I'd say that's phase one. But as we shift increasingly into phase two, we see organizations beginning to tackle the stress that is now being placed on their core applications. because the usage of those applications has increased, of course, from where things were when we were interacting in more of a physical world. And so we do see a number of efforts where organizations are moving ahead and in some cases accelerating efforts to implement world-class monitoring capabilities for application estates that are under stress and having to flex. And you know, in many cases, we see some of that flex also accelerating initiatives to move to cloud technologies.
Let me ask you first, before we go on, I'm curious, is this primarily customer interactions that are now being much more digital because they're not going to retail stores or calling up on phones as easily, or maybe they're just using web and mobile apps more? Is that where the demand increase is coming from that they're seeing?
We see some of both, honestly, but yeah, probably on balance, maybe a bit more from external customers, but we do see some of both because, again, with all employees, especially when you're dealing with larger organizations, all employees now working almost exclusively in a digital domain, it is also placing some stress even on internal facing applications that are employee facing applications. So it is ultimately some of both. I mean, we're working in a digital fashion in every aspect of our lives, both as employees and as consumers or individuals.
We are. Yes,
yeah.
we are.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've also seen is companies are starting to shift how they interact with their customers because they can't be, in physical contact with them, can't be in showrooms at stores.
That's
They're
right.
doing contactless type of interfaces with customers, which means they're doing more through email, through actions that customers can do by clicking on something in an email or an app that for, let's say, a drive-up delivery at curbside kind of things.
Exactly.
What other kinds of things have you seen? I assume you've seen those, but have you seen other kinds of shifts of how companies are interacting with their customers?
Yeah, I mean, we see, definitely a lot of attempts at virtual experiences, creating ways to market in new and different ways. So, lots of companies that are trying to figure out how to be helpful during the COVID-19 situation. So creative ways of thinking about one's core business and how to adapt the skills, the capabilities, the products, the services that are offered to actually help with needs that have arisen during this time among certain customer constituents, and by providing use of products, services during this time, A, being genuinely helpful, B, building some trust and loyalty and appreciation during a time of need, and then C, hopefully winning a long-term relationship from those customers. But yeah, we see things around virtual experiences. We see the incorporation of entertainment, to the point of sort of being creative around sort of marketing and the needs that people feel right now. Everyone's cooped up from home and we're all human. People are looking for things to do. And so we do see some companies, looking at ways not only to be helpful in more critical needs, but also just fun, humor, entertainment, ways to deliver things for people to do, games to play, things like that.
I call that battling against the same day syndrome. Every day is Sunday, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So you mentioned multiple phases kind of being in this phase 2. Describe what you see as phase 3 and phase 4, kind of the next steps of what you think will happen.
Yeah, I think that phase 3 will be as things do start to open up and we all face the questions that are being debated, I think, around executive board tables all over the world right now, as to what will be that new normal, and how do business leaders and policymakers help to shape that new normal in ways that reflect some of the requirements of the new reality, but also look to take advantage of some of the opportunities of that new reality. And I think we've lived in a world where the pace of go was very high. Commuting and travel were stressing people in significant ways. And I do think that there are a lot of very interesting conversations going on right now that we see where interesting questions are being asked about do we need to go back to that way of doing things, or perhaps with all of the advances that we are taking as a society all at once in this sort of massive coordinated experiment that we're in, to go digital, work from home, get everybody set up with their cameras and their work from home situations, and networks are scaled up to handle it. That offers us an opportunity to take advantage of those things in a post-pandemic reality. And so I do think that we're very likely to see more flexible work arrangements. I do think we're very likely to see more online interaction in creative ways between customers and the companies that they do business with. And that's something that we're certainly preparing for in our role as an application monitoring organization. And during the pandemic, we've launched our own initiatives in anticipation of that. We call it Project Assist internally, where we've made available our technologies as well as services and education offerings that we have to organizations who are moving into those phases, right? So we've said, hey, we understand that you're planning for a new reality. We understand that you may be under some immediate strain. Go ahead and avail yourself of these technologies, learn what they can do, and you can use them for free for a period of time, so that you can benefit from them during the crisis phase. Let's call that phase 1, phase 2. But then also begin to understand what is possible as you move into phase 3, phase 4, where the reliance on the digital technologies is likely going to last and persist, and something that can actually help advance the business in interesting and creative ways.
I think it's very arguable. A good argument you could make is the organizations who have already invested in and are well down the way of incorporating or embracing digital transformation type journey, wherever they are on that, are going to be in a much better position to react to whatever a new reality is, versus if you're just starting your digital transformation today, you still need to do it, but that's a tough place to be. I think you certainly don't have the agility and the flexibility, maybe the organizational alignment and institutional knowledge of how to react yet. There's a lot of culture, technology, process, all of those things that goes into doing this. I see your head shaking your head a lot.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really big part of it. You have a great point, which is it's not just about the technology, the people processes, the organizational process, the operating model. Those things are as big of a challenge as the technology. And you're right that the organizations that were already down the path on that journey, I think, are advantaged in a situation like this. But the reality is that with the pressure being put on that transformation by this whole event and the experience that we're all having, wherever you started on the journey, you're either taking a significant step further forward right now, or you're getting weeded out. The organizations that are not able to flex and adapt to at least some degree, I think are unfortunately going to find it really difficult to get through and recover from this. And so it is definitely one of those situations where the ability to flex, transform, adjust, and change the way you operate is really, really critical, I think, to survival right now.
One of the things that I try to talk a little bit more about, because I don't see as much conversation about it. Let me pause for a second on that. You've got a little bit of gray in your beard, not nearly as much as I have. So I'm guessing you've been through some economic challenging times like 2008, for example. But those experiences taught me that part of the challenge of rebuilding businesses when you have a national or international global economic situation is rebuilding those supply chains, because people go out of business, their business model changed, they go into cash starvation or cash hoarding type situations. They may not be in a place to respond, or they may be ahead of you, like at least some people claim is happening in China, that they're ready, but they don't have ways of doing transportation of goods. Not that everybody's buying a lot of those yet anyway. Do you see ways that organizations are thinking about their suppliers and how they're going to plan to rebuild their businesses suppliers come and go, or long-term partners maybe change their strategies too?
Yeah, I think it's an important point. I mean, to the point of the phase one, we've been talking throughout this discussion around sort of the phases. Phase one of sort of the shock of the situation, we've definitely seen a clamp down on cash needs. To your point, right? Organizations, I think, are in many cases uncertain as to exactly what their cash situation is going to be, because cash flows are being interrupted in many industries. And so I do see a lot of focus and interest from large corporations around the world on how do they make arrangements that are cash efficient for them, right? So we do see things like, interest in financing and deferring payments and setting up, to your point, supply chains and vendor relationships that are optimized to give them cash flexibility, as opposed to relationships that may have been optimized for a different purpose prior to the pandemic. So, cash efficiency, cash deferrals, those sorts of things are things that are definitely priorities. And it's one of the reasons we feel, frankly, very fortunate to be part of Cisco. If we look at AppDynamics, relative to some of the other players in the APM space, by being part of such a large global organization that has the strength of balance sheet and the cash capabilities that we have, we're able to actually offer a lot of favorable financing and deferral options to customers that we do see a lot of demand for right now. It's a big part of what companies are doing, for sure.
When it seems like larger technology suppliers, like you mentioned with Cisco, at least have the opportunity to see on a much larger scale, maybe across the organizations within their customers, what they're dealing with, what their plans are, varying levels of exposure, whereas one solution provider of somewhere in the software stack or infrastructure may or may not have access to seeing quite so much. Well, great. Just want to wrap up and ask if is there any other thoughts or anything else you want to share? I'm happy to pick your brain for an hour, but we don't have an hour, so I'm going to make sure to give you a chance to let go of whatever tidbits there may be still you want to share with us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Mitch. Yeah, I think it's, as we were talking about, we find ourselves at an extremely interesting juncture with this whole event. And, I do think that we will come out the other side changed. And I mean that by we as people, right? The humanity will come out the other side changed. And, we're very optimistic that those will be changes that ultimately are for the better. We all spend a lot of time commuting and traveling, and there are implications that has on resource consumption and environment, many different dimensions. And I do think this is a great opportunity for the technology industry to really showcase its value, and for connectivity, applications, digital interactions to hopefully help bring us to a better place where we have a little bit more balance, and can find, of course, the time we all are thirsting for back in the physical world, but also save some of the time that may have been wasted or used inefficiently and at great expense to time and to environment, to reclaim some of that for ourselves and create a little bit more balance. And I'm hopeful that this brings us there.
I share a lot of the same hope. And I think that's important to, it's a bit of a juxtaposition. We have great tragedy with death. We have tragedy with economic impact to people and loss of incomes. But at the same time, you have to have hope for the future and think about what you're building towards, because that brings people opportunities as well, whether they're employed today or not, or recovering from a personal family situation. I think that's important for leaders, technical or business, to continue to, of course, we're thinking about how we continue and move into the future, but communicate that with people and let them know they're part of that journey and that future.
Indeed.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan. It's been great to talk with you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Mitch.
You bet.
Hey, Mitchell, that was great. Mitchell just delivers some great content here. Next up on our show today is the channel man, Mike Vizard, who's going to give us a quick wrap up on Channel Roundup. Mike, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Alan. So we're all waiting to see what happens with the economy, especially as it pertains to IT spending. Gartner and IDC are forecasting only a 1 to 3% drop. They're assuming there will be a significant uptick at the back end of the year, apparently. However, our folks at ISG say that there will be a 7% decline in consumption of managed services for the full year, and there was already a 17% drop just in the last month alone. Steve Hall over there says that we'll probably see increased reliance on cloud and managed services going forward, but it will look very different. The dominant style of IT will quickly become DevOps, where a lot of organizations are not going to hire full-time ops people. They're going to shift more of that responsibility to the left and give the developers more control over the infrastructure using APIs and lots of investments in IT automation frameworks. So pay attention to that for the long haul. Of course, all this depends on what goes on with small businesses. We have seen that only about 1.5 million may have qualified for a loan. There may be more money coming down the pike, but there are 30 million small businesses. So as a percentage, you could assume that there's going to be a lot more companies that are hurting than have the resources to keep their staffs going. Of course, it also depends heavily on what vertical industry they're in. Meanwhile, we're starting to see some mergers and acquisitions. Verizon bought Blue Jeans. I guess they've seen the popularity of Zoom and figured that it was a good time to get into this space. A lot of folks, of course, are disenchanted with Zoom, and there's a lot of security issues around Zoom bombing, and I think that creates an opportunity for partners. In fact, the folks over at the Association for Computing Machinery, otherwise known as ACM, have put out a set of best practices that you may want to download. Of course, give credit where credit is due, but it's a good time to have a conversation with customers at the very least about giving them some advice on how to use these platforms. Also take note this week that Twilio is making available its video services via its API for free to companies who are building COVID-19 type of applications. So there's an opportunity to give back there, and I think one of the outcomes of this whole thing is that video is here to stay as a mainstream part of our application environments, both in platforms like Zoom, but also in context within the application that people are using. So look for people to modernize those applications. Other things to pay attention to this week, Opsani is making a version of its SaaS platform available for free to help rein in cloud costs. This thing is based on AI, or machine learning algorithms, and it analyzes your cost structures to see how your consumption of cloud could be optimized. Of course, it's limited right now in the sense that it's only for Kubernetes environments because that's what people are building for new applications, but it's an interesting idea to go to customers and say, hey, we can rein in those cloud costs because frankly, most of them have not done a good job of monitoring those cloud costs. Also, going back to the automation theme, VMware this week made its vRealize automation platform available via the cloud. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in moving IT management frameworks to the cloud, especially for automation, because as we said earlier, people are going to want to start automating as many things as they can. They're just not going to have the full-time employees. Now, MSPs, of course, have been doing that for a long time now, but this whole category should take off dramatically, starting maybe at the end of the year and all the way up into next. It's something to keep an eye on. All right, and other news, we have Diamante rolled out a Technology Alliance partner program that includes, among others, CloudBees. They're trying to build out a go-to-market motion where it's going to be simpler to deploy Kubernetes on bare metal servers and appliances, and all the integration work will be done beforehand. For example, CloudBees has a Jenkins X CI/CD platform, and when you deploy that, all the deployment for Kubernetes is automated underneath that. As we go forward, we're going to see that that's probably going to be the prime mover for how Kubernetes comes to market. It's going to be embedded in lots of other platforms. Also take note this week, GroupSense has published some examples of COVID-19 scams that you might want to share with your customers, because after all, no good crisis goes to waste, right? So we're seeing cyber criminals launch everything from fake treasury checks to scams involving stealing credentials so that they can then log in as you and claim dollars that might belong to a small business. None of this is a surprise, but the volume of it is quite substantial, and it's an opportunity for partners to again have a conversation with their customers to give some advice to stay in touch. Finally, If you're feeling a little out of sorts, Tech Data, the distributor, has launched a mentoring program for partners. It's not specifically focused on COVID-19 and this whole issue. It's more about how to run your business better and what technologies to look at. But hey, sometimes it's good to talk to somebody other than yourself, especially when you're stuck at home. Thanks, everybody. Alan, back to you.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right. Thanks very much, Mike. Always great to hear from you what's going on with channels. That's going to call an end, a wrap for today's show. Hope you enjoy 420, and we'll see you on Tuesday, 421. This is Alan Schimmel. Be healthy, be well, be strong. TechStrong TV. We're out.